Today's panel is my small way of ensuring that I'm doing my part in the what's, which is bringing forth the powerful voices of Black women and femmes who are the bridges that connect reproductive justice and disability justice. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. Please note that this event is being recorded and live streamed. If you would like to submit a question for our panelists, please do so by using the YouTube chat feature. I'd like to begin by introducing a special guest video for the chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, Senator Patty Murray. Senator Murray has been a champion of disability rights and a leader of reproductive rights since arriving on the Hill in her tennis shoes. Let's hear a few words from her before we begin the panel.
I'm glad to join you to mark the 32nd anniversary of the ADA and to talk about this moment for reproductive rights in our country and how it affects so many people with disabilities. Here's the simple truth. Everyone deserves to have control over their own body, be able to make their own decisions about whether or not to start a family, and be able to get the care and services they need to control their future. But the Supreme Court and extreme Republican lawmakers have just ripped away the most fundamental right. And of course, their overturning Roe has already been and will continue to be especially hard on people with disabilities who already face so many roadblocks to getting the health care they need. From finding providers who take their concerns seriously and understand their medical needs, to finding accessible transportation and facilities. There are too many unacceptable barriers that make it harder, even impossible, for people with disabilities to get the reproductive care they need. So as I fight tooth and nail in Congress against Republicans' increasingly extreme policies, it is so important to me that our fight for reproductive rights includes everyone, including those with disabilities. That's why I'm working on legislation right now to increase people with disabilities' access to reproductive care services in this dark post-Roe chapter for our country. It's why I'm glad to have partners in this fight, like all of you, and why we must never stop fighting to protect our fundamental reproductive rights.
As we heard Senator Murray state, everyone deserves to have control over their bodies. And I'll add, also decide the kind of life that they want to live and what that looks like. With that being said, we're excited about today's panel, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to do a round robin of introductions, which each panelist is to state their name, pronouns, title, and visual description. We'll start with Dr. Jamila Taylor, then to Lori and Heather.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here for this event. I'm Dr. Jamila Taylor, and I serve as the Director of Healthcare Reform and Senior Fellow at the Century Foundation. Lucky to be able to work alongside the fabulous and fearless Vilissa, who opened up our event for today. I am wearing a purple dress, also with a red lip, like Vilissa, hoop earrings, and glasses.
I am Lori Bertram-Roberts. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I am the executive director of and co-founder of the Mississippi Reproductive Freedom Fund. I am a fair-skinned Black femme. I'm wearing shamrock earrings, and I don't know how exactly to describe this busy outfit, but I've got rainbow themed eyeshadow and a pink lip, pink blush, and a rainbow bright satin jacket that has rainbow wrist cuffs and a denim jumper that has a rainbow embroidery on the chest. Oh, and my light or dark blonde hair is up in a ponytail and the ponytail is bleached. So there we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Watkins. I am a light-skinned Black woman. My pronouns are she, hers. And my visual description is I'm wearing a gray turban with clear frames, pearl stud earrings, sort of a bronze statement necklace. It's like 4 pieces, geometric pattern maybe. And then a spaghetti strap black camisole because it's hot as hell. And I'm in the perimenopausal stage since we're talking about reproductive rights, and we don't talk about that enough. So that's where we are. And I'm also a disability rights activist serving on a handful of disability related boards and projects.
Thank you all for the introduction and speaking the truth about life changes. Thank you, Heather, for that, because that's real. In a true me form, I want to gauge the temperature of the room by asking our panelists the first question. How are we feeling? How are we engaging in self-preservation? And Lori, let's start with you, that question.
Don't start with me. Don't start with me. I'm exhausted. I'm honestly just exhausted. Like, I've been doing a lot of sleeping. I've been doing a lot of rescheduling things. I've been doing a lot of outsourcing jobs as much as I can. Honestly, this moment is just exhausting. And I don't know quite how to express that a lot of us were already exhausted before this moment got here, that a lot of us were already undersourced and overworked before we got to this moment, that especially for those of us who are Black and disabled and X other intersections of oppression, queer, whatever, low income, whatever, we were already exhausted. Like, living at the intersections of multiple oppressions and doing advocacy is an exhausting and draining thing to do. And I don't quite know how to express that to people except to just say, I'm tired. I'm tired. Like, I'm bone weary. Like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, like Fannie Lou Hamer was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like, I'm tired. I'm tired. And I don't see an end to the attacks. Like, and it's so predictable, but it's also so predictable how we won't be funded, how we won't be supported. Like, it's the fighting from both sides that is very exhausting. It's like something I said to somebody yesterday is like, I expected having to fight the antis, like the anti-abortion people, but I didn't expect to have to fight so much ableism from within the movement, to so much, classism, so much racism, like, yeah, so much regional hate. Like, boy, do people hate the South. So I'm just gonna wrap up on that. That's where I'm at. I'm tired.
I think tired is a thing, is a strong thing. Heather?
I'm right there with Lori. I'm frustrated. I'm infuriated that people have gone to take such stringent measures without really looking at the complexity of it and how many people would be impacted. Or maybe they don't care. Maybe this is just social control and having dominion over one's bodies and minds, and not really seeing how one decision, kind of like, I like to think of it as the Fibonacci scroll of effects, extending from the personal to those in proximity and outward to the community, not realizing how much connective tissue that it has for us all. So when you think in such singular ways and not really inexpansively, then that's the part that is boggling my mind, that you have people in leadership, where theoretically, leadership is service first and the service is self-serving, right? And so that's where I am in my thought process. It's frustrating, and a combination of just being infuriated, which is tiring, not just physically, but mentally and soul tiring, and then you still got to go to work. You still got to care for your family. You still got to, and fight for your own individual rights. So it's like, you're a planet. You know how when you learn in science class, you're kind of revolving at the same time, you're going around the sun at the same time. The planets are kind of, they're revolving, but they're also revolving around the sun. It's that duality. You cannot stop. You got to keep, doing what you're doing. But then how do you, kind of power down when you don't really have a choice to power down? So that's where I am. I'll stop there.
Well, that's real. The ongoingness of everything in the midst of the chaos is a lot. Jamila?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, continuing on with the theme of being tired, I think one thing I want to lift up again, as a Black woman working in this space is the weight of responsibility I feel, and I'm sure, you all feel as well in terms of one, fighting on the front lines to ensure that, folks that look like us have access to the healthcare and supports that they need in this moment, but also the anger, because that this is intentional. These attacks are intentional. They are in the very essence of what they are, like meant to tear us down, to take away our bodily autonomy, which in turn will impact our families and communities as a whole. And as Heather said, we're tired, but we can't stop, right? So it's that responsibility, the weight, plus the fatigue. So in this moment, I'm really just trying to work through all of those emotions, but also like acknowledging that those things are showing up within me and doing what I can to try to address that. I think rest is really essential as we sort of talk through and navigate this moment. So for me, I'm trying to be more intentional about setting time aside for rest, and also being intentional about putting up boundaries and protecting that rest. If we don't do that, we will get called on for everything all the time. And, people love to call on Black women to do the work, right? And so, and I recognize, that the whole, sort of thought process behind the Black girl magic, perception, but, we also deserve and need rest as well. And so that is something that I am trying to be mindful of, and do more of in this moment, and trying to balance that out with the weight and responsibility I also feel to show up, for my people.
Girl, were you at my therapy appointment?
I know.
Literally what I just talked to about in therapy.
As you all were talking, I was thinking the same thing. Yes, absolutely. And therapy is good and essential in this moment. So hopefully for those of you listening and participating today, if you're having some of these same feelings, hopefully you have access to the therapy and mental health care that you need in this moment.
Yes, and like you all, share similar feelings of being tired, frustrated. But the one thing that always grounds me in these moments is focusing on what I can control. I can't control all the many fires that we're trying to extinguish and make sure they don't get out of control. But the things that I can do, I do. The resting, the boundary, the not, doom scrolling every day. Remembering that there is joy in the middle of the chaos. That has been my grounding in this moment. That's what it's been in many of my life moments. So that's what I've been leading heavy into. So thank you all for sharing that.
And can I say one other thing?
Yes.
That we didn't create this,
exactly.
Right? That even though that we're combating it, even if we're doing direct service work, like the fact that we can't help everyone is by design. Like we didn't make that design. Like we're not the ones failing. I have to tell the volunteers at MRFF that, and I had to tell staff at Yellowhammer that, like, we're not the ones. I know it feels like we're failing because we want to grab up our entire community and put them in our arms and be able to help everyone, because obviously we don't want to see anybody suffer, but we ain't the ones causing this. Like, I've told press, stop calling me and asking me how I'm gonna fix abortion access in the South. Call Joe Biden.
I'm here for that, and we didn't cause it, but we're here but we're being pushed to be the sole fixers of it, and that's the problem. And I'm going to dive into our questions and start with Jamila. I know that you gave an incredible testimony for the Health Committee earlier this month about reproductive justice in a post-Roe world. I would like for you to share what you discussed in your testimony and what it meant to you, and also give us a status update of sorts of the state of things at this time that's happening both either stateside or federally.
Sure, absolutely. This is Jamila speaking. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for the question. Well, first off, it was an honor to be called on by the Senate Health Committee, Chairwoman Murray in particular, to be recognized as an expert in our field and to come up before the Senate and talk about this issue in such a critical moment in this country. So my testimony really focused on, what the health consequences could be, as fallout from the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. I focused on the Black maternal health crisis that we currently have in this country. Right now, Black women are about 3 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related causes when compared to white women. Black women are also more likely to lack access to the abortion care that they need, as well as contraception. And so it was really important to sort of center this moment around, what we could see coming down the pike when it comes to Black maternal health. Researchers have shown us that the overall maternal mortality crisis could increase by about 20% because of this decision to overturn Roe. For Black women, the rate could increase by 40%. And so those are some of the things that I presented to the Health Committee. I also talked a lot about this concept around forced pregnancy. When people do not have access to the abortion care that they need, and they're dealing with an unwanted pregnancy, not being able to access an abortion could be dangerous for them. It could lead to poor maternal health outcomes, which in turn could also lead to the health of their infants and the children they may already be parenting. And so this really is an issue that will not only impact the overall health of women and pregnant and birthing people, but also, as I mentioned earlier, could also impact the broader communities that we live and work in. I also want to lift up the fact too that, we do have some policy solutions that are under consideration in Congress right now that could help address some of these things. The Women's Health Protection Act is legislation that would restore the federal right to abortion. It has been voted on in the House and it has passed there. It has not passed in the Senate. And so I know we'll get in more to what our listeners can be doing in this moment and the fallout from that. But essentially, I think we definitely need more pro-choice representation at all levels of government. And in terms of other updates in the space, one of the things that I have seen come out of this decision is a focus on abortion funds, right? I've seen, more folks talking about abortion funds, what they do, how they help support women and pregnant people to get the funding for the abortions that they need. And I think that's also really essential in this moment, due to longstanding restrictions on insurance coverage like the Medicaid program. Many of the people that need abortions are enrolled in the Medicaid program, and because of the Hyde Amendment, Medicaid can only cover abortions in the limited cases of rape, life, and incest. So oftentimes these folks are going to abortion funds to help them raise the money that they need to get an abortion. We also know that travel costs are going to be something that is going to be coming up for folks in this moment. And there are anti-choice politicians that are even trying to restrict our ability to travel across state lines if we live in a state that has banned abortion. So there is legislation Congress is also considering to address that. It's called the Ensuring Abortion Access Act of 2022. And then I would be remiss without mentioning the Black Maternal Health Omnibus Act, which does, sort of center the needs and supports of, Black women and other pregnant and birthing people that want to continue on with their pregnancy, making sure that they have the structural supports and healthcare that they need. That is a comprehensive package of 12 bills aimed at addressing, various dimensions of the Black maternal health crisis. So as a community, we have come up with these solutions. Some of that has translated into legislation, but unfortunately, we don't have the votes in order to see these things over the finish line. And I could go on with other updates. I think there's a lot happening in this moment. One last thing that I will mention is that in the midst of all of this, there are some states that are doing the right thing and have committed to expanding access to abortion in this moment. So states like California, Maryland, and Illinois, just to name a few. In terms of the states that have banned abortion, they are largely concentrated in the Midwest and the South. So it's really an important moment to sort of, as a community, trying to figure out for the women and birthing people that are in those restrictive states, how to make sure that we can support them with access to the abortions that they need. So I will stop there.
So thank you, Jamila. I really wanted to ask you those questions because we feel like we're being bombarded with so much information and not knowing what is fully happening. And I think that you gave a clear picture of what moves are being made and, what we need to be paying attention to. I'm going to shift over to Lori. And I want to say that you are known to be a powerhouse when it comes to addressing reproductive justice and abortion rights through a disability justice scope. I want you to share with us how you define reproductive justice, and knowing that some people may not know how these two frameworks intersect. And when it comes to your work, I want to know, how does this decision on Roe impact the reproductive services and quality of care and support for disabled people, particularly those of us who are much marginalized, like our Black disabled kinfolk? You're on mute.
See, I have to mute myself because I be in here like it's church, like, yeah. And like, you can't let me be off mute because I mess up the whole live. Anyway, that's why I always have to silent. Like I have to ASL clap. So anyway, so thank you, ASL. Okay, I was like, what did you ask me again? So my definition of reproductive justice is a pretty standard one. The right to parent, the right not to parent, the right to parent in safe and secure communities. And I like to always expand on the right to parent a little bit. Like that's the right not to be surveilled, not to have your children stolen from you by Child Protective Services, the right to have your parenting affirmed if you are a disabled parent, if you are a low income parent, right? So like the right to not to be afraid to send your child to school and not to think that you might be surveilled because your child had to wear the same pants twice, right? Because your washer was broke, right? Simple things, right? Or something that happened in the case of my children, real story. My children were wearing their natural hair. I couldn't braid their hair anymore because of my rheumatoid arthritis. And a school worker started braiding their hair for them, thinking I was like on drugs. And so I had to politely let her know, oh, I'm sorry. I mean, if you really want to braid their hair, I mean, I guess there was nothing wrong with their natural hair. And also, I'm sick and mind your business. So like those kinds of things, right? And it's also the right to have your sexuality affirmed and not stigmatized and to be seen as a sexual being. Because, oh my goodness, can we just have people like not, think that we are all asexual because we're disabled, right? Like when I got my scooter, it didn't come with a no sex for Lori sign. Like that didn't happen when I got my scooter. Like I'm in my 40s and I'm ready to party. So like that's not a real thing, right? It's the right to full reproductive health care that fits your life, right? Not not coercive healthcare, not forced sterilizations, not coercive birth control, not, oh, here's your 3 options out of the multitude of options for contraception, not you can't have a tubal until you've had 3 kids, or not here, we'd love to give you a tubal now that you've had 3 kids. No, for real, you need to get a tubal, right? None of that. So it's all of those things. That's what reproductive justice is to me. And for me, as I'm pretty much the only visibly disabled ED in RJ that I know of, at this was, especially in abortion funds. Now there's plenty of chronically ill folks that are in leadership in the movement, but as far as when I go to conferences, it's just me. It's just me. And so a lot of times it's just me and maybe one other person or one other fund raising things like making sure clinics do appropriate translating for folks who need ASL, not video translation, actual in-person translators, right? Making sure folks have appropriate tables for folks to get on, right? Or that they're not being like, oh, we're just going to bring in 4 people to lift you. We're not going to bother to have a lift. We're not going to bother to have tables that go down. Like it's 2022. There are tables that move. Like get some new tables. If you haven't replaced your tables since 1960, perhaps it's time. So like, just like these really simple things, like just things about auditory diversity. Like a lot of clinics will not let you have an MP3 player or a phone when you go into the clinic. But for a lot of people who have issues with noise, they need something to listen to during their procedure. So just a lot of things like that we bring up. Because a lot of people think about accessibility in very small terms. They think if they've complied with the ADA, they're accessible. We good. And that does not accessibility make, right? And so one of our things within the Mississippi Reproductive Freedom Fund is always challenging ourselves and the other organizations that we partner with and that are our collaborators and co-conspirators to make their stuff more accessible. And that means from protests to their programming. Like if you're running a diaper bank, are you carrying diapers for adults and for youth who need diapers? If you're running a formula program, are you making sure that you have formula for folks of all ages? Because during this formula shortage, it's not just children and it's not just babies that need formula. It's people who need formula because they have, feeding tubes, right? So like if you're doing a period supply program, do you have incontinence supplies? Like all of these things are about accessibility, right? It's about accessibility to your programs, but it's also about thinking beyond just simplistic ideas about who needs what. Like even just thinking about allergies, just simple stuff, just thinking about latex allergies. Like there's so many programs that don't even think about that. Like if you're just only getting latex condoms in 2022, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? It's just really simple. Some of the stuff is so simple, but I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough within MRFF is that we do family justice work. And a lot of that is supporting folks who are disabled parents when they are threatened with child protection services intervention, right? And so what we do is we come in and we do support to get CPS out their life. So if they need physical stuff, we come in and buy it. And if they need somebody to come in and like maybe watch their kids for a couple hours a week or come and do some cleaning for them, a couple times a week, support services that they should be able to get for free through the government, right? Instead of just the government coming in and saying, oh, but we can come and snatch your kids. That's the help we're offering. Help we're offering is to give your Black children to some white people. That's the help. Like, that's not help. So that's the work. Sorry, that was a really long answer.
Oh, that was a great answer. And that's the answer that I was hoping you would give in the very diverse ways as to how we need to look at this issue, from understand what true accessibility is. It's not just having an automatic door or a ramp. It goes deeper than that within our facilities and clinics, to understanding how ableism exists in the systems that interact with us, like you were saying, snatching our kids away, but not giving us the appropriate resources to be able to parent and to thrive and not struggle. And speaking of the right to parent, Heather, I want to come to you. You and I know intimately about the fact that the right to parent is an intersectional matter. And I want you to share your experience as a Black disabled mother, as well as what are the unknown barriers for many when it comes to exercising one's right to parent with a disability.
Sure. I'm just was nodding my head vigorously when Lori was talking, because I'm thinking, so many of our choices as disabled people and parents are second guessed and side-eyed, and to offset this sort of state intrusion, right? Whether you're, going to school or, you're out and about in public. And that can even come from family members. So that can be a barrier there, where family members are like, are you sure about that? Or are you going to have another kid? So it's that. And then even with partners, because, one of my experience was, after my child's father and I broke up, they filed for custody on the basis and grounds of me having a disability, nothing else. It was like, and I was fortunate because the way it was served, he actually gave the paper to my daughter. So when we got into court, the judge said, "Sir, now you don't serve by a 10-year-old." So that was thrown out. And then the next time, it was something that had to do with the birth certificate, which, he already signed. The judge says, "Your name is on the birth certificate." So somebody must have told him after that, like, you don't have a child support case against you just yet, but you keep going this way, it's going to get worse for you. It's already thrown out. So that was my little, experience in terms of that, in trying to have my child taken away from me. I think we need to have more support systems in place in the family. And again, not having that second guess. And what Lori talked about, even with clinicians and providers, assuming that we're asexual, that we don't need the education, beginning at very young ages. I think, for me, I was so happy to receive reproductive health care and education through locally based public healthcare centers. So shout out to those, locally based ones. Here in Boston, Massachusetts, I went to Mattapan Community Health Center, got services through another Black woman. And then before I could get contraceptives, I had to go through an educational, little class, a table that was full of other young Black girls. So that was really cool to have us, asking questions, giving, pamphlets, leaflets. I remember on the table, there was these little anatomical figures, of the uterus and the vagina. That was important for my little 14-year-old self, trying to be responsible, and taking control and exercising my bodily autonomy, right? And so I just think about that, how that helped me going forward in making choices to use birth control pills and condoms, and they were free. And she was explaining to us how, there was a government title, funding, and that helped pay for that, and how these all kind of worked in concert with one another, and I was appreciative of that, because when we asked questions, it was non-judgmental. It was from someone that looked like us in the community. It was culturally sensitive and responsive care we got. And that's important. And so you need all of those kind of frameworks and systems in place for you to, be fully informed and make these kinds of decisions. As I was thinking about Lori when she said, you need that structural and physical access in offices. You need to have, you go into a hospital or healthcare center, and you can't even get on the examination table. I've had that happen. So you cannot get properly examined if you can't access the damn exam table, or you can't get weighed, or you can't, utilize mammography equipment. That's so disheartening, and it's infuriating, because why shouldn't you have the same kind of access as your non-disabled peers and counterparts, And so those are some of the barriers, and not having, culturally competent providers who have some understanding of disability in all of its incarnations, like, that comes with complexity, range, and nuance, and overlaps and intersect with all other marginalized identities. So those are the kinds of barriers, I think, that Black disabled persons have to contend with and try to navigate the system as best we can in becoming parents and choosing to become parents or not.
I think you raised some really great points, particularly about the sex education and learning about body autonomy, which is something that disabled youth are not exposed to as it should be as their non-disabled counterparts. That really does strengthen your understanding as to what's going on in your body as a young person, but also how to protect yourself from STIs, from pregnancy, and even if you experience something traumatizing, knowing how to report that, knowing where to go, and who can support you in that time of need. Also learn about consent. All these things are so important for a young disabled person to understand as they go from younger adolescence to young adulthood. And then another key point that both you and Lori stated that resonated with me was trying to get all of these screenings done that's supposed to be early detection, like pap smears. Then when you get over 40, your mammograms. A lot of these things are not accessible for us, and that put us at higher risk of certain conditions that if they were caught early, they could be remedied or at least, treated sooner than before. So how that access isn't just an inconvenience on the accessibility aspect, but also could be life-threatening if you are not able to get the testing that you need as your own body develops and particularly as you get older. So really understanding that these issues in some ways go well beyond reproductive health. It really goes into the quality of life that disabled people experience and what does that mean for us. And I want to get into a question for everybody. I would like for each of you to share at least one or two things that each of us can do that'll be instrumental in the fight for rights and access, both short and long term. What are some ways we can be both intentional and take care of ourselves for the long battle ahead? Jamila, I'm going to start with you.
Great. I think the one thing that I would want to share with folks, but preface it by saying I recognize that folks are in some ways feeling disconnected from the electoral process in this moment and wondering whether or not their vote even matters, but it does matter. And so, my advice to folks is that, we need more pro-choice representation in all levels of government, local, state, federal. So I would encourage folks to support, pro-choice candidates in your elections.
I think that's a critical message for this year, this election year, next year when we have different elections for different, particularly state and local, and then for 2024, the presidential year. So thank you for that. That's our responsibility to do our homework as to who's running for office and what their campaigns are about. And then for those in office, to hold them accountable, that they work for us and we forget that.
Can I just piggyback real quick?
Yes.
2 seconds. So a couple of days ago, it was really heartening to see Ayanna Pressley and Kathleen Clark get arrested, protesting in front of the Supreme Court. So they're doing the work, right? Coming from behind the podium, and protesting and really, making the point clear. So I'm really proud of that kind of leadership, representing us. And, Ayanna Pressley being another Black disabled woman, has been really, really vocal. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point really clear because I love that point that you made. And those are just 2 examples out of many.
Oh yes, and Congresswoman Presley is such a champion for our community and so fierce in her, truth and owning her identity and doing what she can for the community. And it's just an example of putting the people that would do the work in the right places. Lori?
I mean, I'm going to say immediately, definitely, do what you need to do for your mental and physical health. I mean, I'm encouraging everybody to, the simple stuff, stay hydrated. I don't know about y'all, but I will like totally forget to drink when I'm stressed out. I mean, I'm having to, do deep breaths and do a body check to make sure I'm not holding myself tense and tongue thrusting my teeth because that's an anxiety response I have. So definitely like just check in with your body and like, relax those things. But I mean, that's just like an immediate thing that I'm encouraging everyone to do every day, get a little sunlight. I'm kind of a vampire. I don't do that. Also, I have light sensitivity. But beyond that, definitely plug in with your local abortion fund. Like that's just basic 101 stuff. But also consider training as an abortion doula. I'm throwing this out there because we do not have enough disabled folks in the doula space at all, regardless. And a lot of folks, we have like virtual doulas. It's so funny to me because we were doing virtual doulas like 8 years ago, and everybody was like, virtual doulas aren't a thing. And that sounds like a scam and woo, woo, woo. Shut up, ableists. Anyways, then COVID hit. And now everybody's a virtual doula, and virtual doulas are a thing now. And it's like, it's the thing. So now all of us can be virtual doulas because, the ables have done it now. And so it's a thing. Anyway, so become a doula, think about becoming a doula. But more than anything, I think it's really incumbent upon us to learn about self-managed abortion. I'm going to keep shouting this from the rooftops that it is incumbent on all of us to learn about the protocols for self-managed abortion, learn about how people can safely get pills if they are in a state that's restricted. But even if they are not in a state that's restricted, many of us cannot get to a clinic. For many of us, clinics are not accessible, especially if we are disabled and trans, disabled and queer, disabled and poor, all of these things, right? And so I just think it's very important for us to know these things and also to remember we've been self-managing our abortions for decades. Like disabled folks have been putting together combinations of medications and, ending their pregnancies for a long, long time. And so this is not new to us. Like we can do this. And I just think it's important for us to look out for each other like we always have and make sure that we have that information for folks if they need it. That's just harm reduction.
I like that personal responsibility that you're giving and to be more intentional and figure out there's something you can do. And these are the ways. Heather?
Yes, absolutely. Those self-checks are so important. And also checking on one another and supporting one another in the ways that they need to be supported, not the ways that we think they should be supported. So I think that is key. And just amplifying our stories, because we're the first ones, we know our stories best, and so it's just, I think it's critically important to keep talking about it, because it's easy to, have mainstream forget about that intersection of disability rights and justice and reproductive care and justice. But if we have to keep talking about it, because we don't have the luxury to check out. We cannot, not talk about it and not be tuned in. I hear some people say, oh, politics is boring. I'm like, that's your luxury, isn't it? That's privilege for you if you cannot pay attention to what's going on. We always have to stay tuned in. And because we have to stay tuned in, that's why we're so tired. Our bandwidth gets low from all that tuning in, right? So those are just some of the things I think are helpful in the moment and in the long run, meeting out some of that work and what others were saying about saying no, because it's a complete sentence and it's all right. So yeah, definitely self-checking, supporting one another, raising another's voices and concerns and keeping the conversation going and handing off. Sometimes, you have to delegate some of those duties, and stop trying to take control all the time. Give it to someone else. Pass the baton, pass the mic. Sometimes we have too much privilege and we're not thinking about the multiply marginalized folks that don't get access to the same things we do because of our levels of privilege, whatever they may be. And so it's important to pass that mic and to give people opportunities. And those are the ways I think we will get through this in the long run.
I agree with that. And I'm going to say something to the professionals out there, medical professionals, health professionals, like social workers and so forth. We have a responsibility in this moment to adhere to our code of ethics within our respective profession. And those code of ethics supersede your personal beliefs as to what someone should or should not be doing when it comes to their bodies. Particularly if you are someone like myself who has a licensing board you have to answer to in case you are in violation of anything. You have a responsibility to do your job. You have a responsibility to ensure that people have the right to the correct information so they can make their best decision about themselves. That is your responsibility. That's why you became a part of the field you are in. And I think sometimes, particularly in some of the news that I've seen, certain medical professionals, some health professionals are going to have to really stay true to that. And I think that is the most concerning part for me, is to seeing the harm of professionals who are trying to uphold this and getting, just targeted because they're doing their job, and also professionals who are not doing this and are harming clients, patients, and so forth. So I think that in that responsibility, we have it within our professional scope to be competent, to be a safe space, to check our biases and prejudices when it comes to people and the care that they're seeking. And if we cannot do that, then maybe it's time for us to do a self-check as to finding another path to take. Because we need agents of change and not agents of harm in this moment. And we're going to go to one question before we wrap up for today and get started. Yes, Lauren?
Oh, what I was going to say is the thing that I tell social workers all the time is that there is no need for you to rat out your clients for having an abortion that you didn't approve of if it was self-managed. There is no need for you to snitch on your clients. Like, that is not helping them. I've found people who think that they're helping them, or that there's some kind of mandated reporter requirement for them to let people know that their client has self-managed their abortion. If they need medical care, help them get medical care. But at no point do you need to advise them to tell the medical officials stuff that will get them in trouble legally. Like, that is not your job. Please don't do that. So many people have been criminalized because medical officials have been more concerned about getting evidence than giving them care, and we cannot have that.
Exactly. Thank you. Could not have said it any better than myself. So our question from our audience, and thank you for whoever sent this question over, says, what can allies, and I'd rather call them co-conspirators or accomplices, do to support the work with birthing people and reproductive, or to have a disability lens? So what can someone maybe do today to really have that disability lens that may be missing in what they're doing?
Listen to disabled people.
Simple, simple, but also not.
I mean, like, honestly, I feel like, first of all, it took me a minute to admit to myself that I was disabled. Let me just say, I was disabled for longer than I admitted that I was disabled. But I originally came into the disability rights movement as a teenager, caring for my disabled children. And I just sat back and listened to disabled people. Like, what the hell did I know? I was a kid caring for children who have autism. Like, I didn't know shit. So all I had to do, all I needed to do was sit back and listen to people. And I feel like that's your first step. Like, shh, hush up and just listen. Honestly, just listen. Like, you can't make any moves until you've been quiet. Like, there's like, I feel like there's like a mandatory year where you just need to be quiet, listen, read, learn. Like, there's a quote I saw one time where it's like 70% of activism is education. I wouldn't say it's quite that high, but honestly, a lot of activism is educate. Like, I could never do interviews if I didn't know all this history and whatever. That's not stuff that somebody sat down and told me. That's me reading books and sitting down and listening to lectures. And you got to do the work. The work ain't just doing rallies. Like, it's work. Yeah.
No,
This is Heather. This is Heather. That is so true. You have to realize that you're the secondary voice and not the central one. You should be doing a lot of listening. And disabled people, we've had to take control of our narrative because it wasn't across the media landscape in any meaningful way. It was pity and pedestal, sadness and supercrypt. And we have a much more comprehensive lived experience than just, that sort of narrow lens and view. So we have to keep widening the lens. And when in doing so, these co-conspirators can share and amplify our stories in that way so that people get a more nuanced understanding of what it means to live with disabilities, with complexity and the range and the nuance, that we keep talking about. And why is that important? Because it can make its way, what you don't know can make its way into the legislature, right? By someone who's uninformed or misinformed and really gut punch quality of life instead of supporting it, like we see now, and so many of our rights being stripped away. And so, that's what it really boils down to. But also, it takes a lot of us a longer time to self-identify, if ever, as disabled, because we assume that disability is synonymous with negativity, and it's not. It has a much wider lens than the prism of limitations only. Whether you have been born with disabilities, acquired by accident, illness, or it be age-related, those are things that we need to be understanding and learning about in grade school. We also need to be learning about historical figures in grade school and as young adults, because that way it shapes our conceptions about disability and how that plays out in your life and your politics, and how you govern your life. So I think about Fannie Lou Hamer. I think about Sojourner Truth. I think about Harriet Tubman. I think about Brad Lomax. These are all people with disabilities doing that kind of work, and how their disability impacted their lives and their choices and the way they governed their lives. So when we learn things like that and we normalize disability instead of it being newsworthy, maybe just maybe we'll get ahead, right? Maybe just maybe we'll have this more progressive conversation that is so natural, that is laughable when people talk about, well, will I be accommodated? Will I have access? Of course you will. But until then, right? We ain't there. We are a long, long way from there. So, yeah.
I love that. And I think the main thing is when you're told that you're not doing enough, sit with that. You're upset being told that you're not a good ally if you thought you was. That work is not on the disabled person. That work is on you to hold that truth, to figure out how you can become better, and to not burden disabled people with your feelings. Because that's something that we are forced to hold, projected to hold. When we tell not disabled folks in our lives, whether it's family, professionals, or so forth, that you're not doing enough, or that you need to do it more intentionally this way. To know that to correct you is labor alone, emotional labor. To tell you that you're getting something wrong is already an act of service. Don't expect us to do more than that by forcing us to coddle you as you work through your feelings about how to get better. That's part of personal responsibility. If you want to be an ally, co-conspirator, accomplice, whatever the role is, that is your work to do. You can learn from disabled people, but at the end of the day, that is your work to follow through on. And I see it all the time in the work that I do. I see it online, the pushback, and non-disabled folks have to take responsibility of that. And we as disabled people have to take responsibility to not coddle them either. And so I think that's the note that I want to live on, is that if you want to be better, you have to be intentional. And if you're not going to be intentional, then leave us alone, because you're going to continue to do more harm than good. I just want to say this has been a dynamic panel, as I knew it would be since we've been planning it, but my heart is so full from everyone's words here today. And I want to thank you all for attending our event. Give a special thanks again to our lovely panelists, Jamila, Heather, and Lori, as well as the Century Foundation team. And I want to remind everyone that a recording will be made available immediately on the Century Foundation website at tcf.org, as well as on our YouTube channel. I hope that everyone has learned something today that they can take back with them, figure out the role that they want to do in this moment, in the moment itself, and for the long haul. And thank you for being in this work with us. And have a great day.